Hi everybody, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Welcome back to our vegetable garden in Spokane, Washington, where the hardiness zone ranges from 5B to 6A. Well, I'm really excited about today's video because I've been getting some requests from folks for a video about the timing of harvesting their crops and also what to do with them, whether it's how to preserve them or just some ideas about cooking. So that's the topic for today. And before I get started, I wanted to mention that at the end of the video, I'm going to list several really great resources for you, and all but one are free. The one that costs something costs hardly anything, and it is a great book for preserving your harvest. I'm going to go through the crops alphabetically, so I get to start with beans. And I think a lot of people know me for growing pole beans because of this arbor that we created to support them on. But I also grow bush beans. And the thing with knowing when to harvest them has to do partly with the variety, because you can look at a seed packet and see, well, how long is a mature pod supposed to be? Is it 5 inches? Is it 10 inches? And in the case of Vortex, which is the pole bean that I mostly grow, they can be really long and still nice and tender. So that's one of the qualities I love about this variety. However, the thing you need to know is that if you pick your beans too late, they can be really tough and not a good experience. So let me show you a couple examples of that. So here's a young Vortex bean. You can see it's really small in diameter. It's grown a few inches, but I think it'd be a waste to harvest it this small because it has so much more potential. Now, if you look next to it, here's one that's growing really great. And this will be very tender, but I'm still going to let it grow a little bit longer because I know that they'll stay tender for a few more days. Now, do you see this blue yarn in here? I'm using the yarn to mark the pods that I want to let mature completely so that I can save the seeds for next year. And this is a good way to stop me when I'm kind of in the mode of picking lots of beans. I want to make sure I save this one. So that's my little way of denoting that. But you can see that the pod is quite bulky. And that is definitely not going to be a tender eating experience. Now, just as a side note regarding saving the bean seeds, I'm just going to leave those pods on the vines until fall gets here. And they will be completely dry and crispy, and that's when I'll harvest the pods themselves. I'll bring them indoors and I'll just put them in a cardboard box or a basket and let them finish drying out. And then when that happens, that's when I'm going to actually shell the beans and set them aside for growing next year. It's super easy, and I have found that Vortex seeds are a bit hard to find these days, and I don't want to miss out on growing these in the future. Other than eating lots of beans during the growing season, what do I do to preserve them for future meals? Well, first of all, I'm really good about picking the beans regularly so those pods don't get tough. Once I've harvested a bunch, I will snap them into bite-sized pieces, blanch them in boiling water for 3 minutes, then cool them down in cold water, dry them, and pop them into freezer bags and put them into our freezer. They are super handy to have all by themselves, or sometimes we make a green bean salad, or you can certainly put them in soups and stews. In one of my covered raised beds, I'm growing beets. And in addition to harvesting them for their wonderful roots, I also occasionally will harvest the leaves off the plants because they are delicious when you steam them and maybe put a little bit of red wine vinegar with them. Yum. But let me show you how the roots are developing, and then we'll get into storing them and using them in the future. Now really, you can harvest beets at any old time, but I like to harvest larger beets and then store them through the fall and winter months to enjoy whenever. So if you look here, this is a whopper. And this is a cylindra or cylindrical beet, and it's very common for them to stick up out of the soil. So this is not a problem. But you can harvest small beets and they are just as tasty. So what do we do with the beets that we've grown? We mostly roast them in the oven and then make beet salads for lunch or dinner. And oh my, are those tasty. At the end of the growing season, when we want to store beets, we first rinse off any soil on the roots, let them dry a little bit, and then we have a bin system that we use for storing root crops that works great. So it's basically like a Rubbermaid bin, and we lightly moisten some straw and put a layer down in the bottom, then we put a layer of beets, then another layer of straw, another layer of beets, and so on. And then we move the bin to our garage, which stays pretty cool during the fall and winter months. And that is a great way to store them. This has worked really well for us over many, many years. This is our broccoli bed, and if you've seen my videos before, you know that Belstar is our favorite variety to grow, and that's what you're looking at here. I think that knowing when to harvest broccoli just takes some experience, so let me show you what I'm talking about. Now, as my luck would have it, I just harvested the broccoli yesterday. Talk about bad timing. I should have waited for this video. But I do have a couple of examples to show you to illustrate what you're looking for. So this is a side shoot from the broccoli plant. And when I touch it, you see how it's really firm? It's not moving at all. That is too soon to harvest it. You could harvest it and eat it. It probably would taste just fine. But the thing is, this head is going to get larger, so you get more bang for your buck by being a little bit patient. So here's another side shoot of broccoli, and you can see it's kind of popped open and it's more soft. So this is one that I should cut today because it's really not going to amount to much of anything. And I think it's done that because it has been so hot here lately. I think it just accelerated its growth process. But in general terms, when you're harvesting heads of broccoli, you don't want a really firm, tight head, but you don't want a really soft one either. So it's right in the middle, and it will take a little experimentation on your part to get the ideal size. How do we preserve the heads of broccoli that we won't be eating right away? Well, I bring them inside, give them a rinse off, and then I cut them into bite-sized pieces, more or less. I blanch them again in boiling water for about 3 minutes. Then I plunge them into cold water to stop that cooking action, dry them off, put them into freezer bags, and pop them into our freezer. And what a treat it is in the dead of winter to have something made with the broccoli you grew in your garden. We primarily use carrots as a side dish. We'll steam slices of them and add in sort of a sweet and sour sauce for a glaze that's made of equal parts brown sugar, mustard, and butter. And oh my, those are good. But we also add them to soups and stews and casseroles. They're really versatile and a great thing to have on hand. But what I wanted to share with you about carrots is that you can pretty much harvest them throughout the growing season as needed. Generally, once they're about 3/4 of an inch in diameter, they're going to be a great size. And then, of course, they'll just keep growing as the season progresses. How do we store carrots over the fall and winter months? Well, we do the same thing that we do with beets. We layer them with lightly moistened straw in a bin, put them in our garage where it stays cool, and they keep really, really well. I like growing celery for one big reason. Let's say you want to make tuna fish sandwiches and you want to add in some celery to it. So you go to the grocery store, you buy a head of celery, you bring it home, you use a couple stalks in the tuna fish sandwiches, and then you put it in your vegetable crisper of your refrigerator and you promptly forget about the rest of the celery. So it turns into a slimy mess. That's not good, and it's very wasteful. So by growing celery in your garden, you can just harvest a stalk or two at a time. The plant keeps growing and it's out there available for whenever you want to make something that requires celery. But when fall arrives, I know they will get frosted very badly. So before a frost is due, I will cut off all of the stalks, wash them, chop them up, put them into freezer bags, and put them into our freezer. And that is a great way to add celery to soups, stews, and casseroles throughout the fall and winter months, and you didn't have to go to the store and buy it. Bill and I absolutely love growing sweet corn because it is so tasty. There is a bit of a trick knowing if the ears are ripe. There's 3 possible ways you can find out. The easiest is to look at the silks that have emerged from the tip of the ear. They should be brownish and very dry and crispy. That's a very good sign. But if you're not sure, the second thing you can do is to feel that tip of the ear. Does it feel like the kernels are rounding out the tip? Because that's also a good sign that it's ready to be picked. And if you're still unsure, peel back a part of the husk, just a little bit, and take a look. See what you think. And then you'll know for sure if it's time to pick it. Now, other than harvesting fresh ears and cooking each one for 2 minutes in the microwave, we also will cook a whole lot of them. Slice the kernels off the ears and then add them to freezer bags and pop them into the freezer. That is so great for a side dish, and we also like using it in polenta and other types of dishes. 2025 has definitely been the year of the cucumber in our garden. I cannot believe how many our plants are producing. And they go very quickly from a nice size to a crazy big size that can be filled with seeds in the middle and also be a bit bitter. So just like I suggested with beans, first take a look at your seed packet because it should tell you roughly what the normal size of a cucumber is in that variety so that you pick them at the right time. It's better to harvest them when they're smaller than larger for those reasons I mentioned earlier. In addition to eating cucumbers fresh in sandwiches or making a simple salad with them, I like to make pickle relish with them so we can enjoy it in sandwiches or in tartar sauce to go with fish and those types of things. Let's talk about garlic, which I think is one of Bill's very favorite vegetables. We harvest garlic in the summer when the lowest 3 or so leaves of the plants have turned brown. Bill moves them to a shed to let them completely dry out. Once that has happened, he snips off the stalk as well as the roots and stores the bulbs in a box in our basement. And of course, I don't have to tell you how many uses there are for garlic, but we absolutely love garlic and we use them in so many dishes. I thought I would just talk about melons briefly because I know that there are a lot of gardeners who will grow cantaloupes and honeydew melons and so on. And I wanted to share my tip for knowing when to harvest them because it's a little bit tricky, but once you nail it, oh my gosh, they're so delicious. So let's take a look at this little cantaloupe, which is Tuscan Napoli, in case you're wondering about the variety. There are three things to look for. First of all, notice the color. This used to be a light green with dark green stripes. And now you can see it's just kind of a pale peachy color. So that's a good sign. Also, and of course they always want to put their stems where you can't see them, but the second thing to look for is the vine pulling away from the melon, or you could say, is the melon pulling away from the vine? And that means that it's ripe. And then the last thing to look for is yellow jackets. If you see a bunch buzzing about, they can smell the sweetness of that ripe melon, and that is a dead giveaway. When it comes to growing onions and shallots, you can pretty much harvest them anytime throughout the growing season. But if you're wanting to store them so that you can use them in the coming months, there is a small trick to it. Wait for the stem of the onions or shallots to fall over completely. At that point, you can pull them up, move them to a dry area, such as a shed, and let them completely dry out. You're not trimming anything off yet. Once they are papery dry, you can snip off that main stalk, you can trim off the roots, and then what we do is we just put them into boxes and store them in our garage. They will keep for quite a few months. But that said, you also need to be aware of the variety you're growing and how long they tend to keep in storage. And I've shown the DixondaleFarms.com website in the past. On their website, they indicate how long different types of onion varieties keep in storage. We really like to grow shelling peas in our garden, and our favorite variety is Green Arrow. Generally speaking, because there's a little bit of a finesse to this, we harvest them when the pods are full. But you have to maybe take a few samples first because you want them to be sweet and not starchy. So keep that in mind when you're harvesting them. We mostly eat them with our dinners during the late spring. But if there are any left over, we blanch and freeze them so we can enjoy them during the fall and winter months. But that rarely happens, to be honest. This is one of Bill's pepper beds, and the nice thing about them is that you can harvest them pretty much any time once they have put on a bit of growth. But if you let the sweet peppers mature, for example, a lot of the ones that Bill's growing will turn this deep red, which is really cool, and it looks beautiful in dishes. And the same thing happens with the hot peppers. They will tend to turn a color based on which variety they are. But you can pretty much harvest them over a long period of time. We use some of them during the summer months, either as a snack or in fresh salsa or an omelet or anything along those lines. But we also use them in homemade tomato sauce and salsa. And I've got a recipe for both of those on my website. I'm a spice wimp, so hot peppers are definitely Bill's domain. He likes eating some during the late summer as a snack and also makes hot salsa with them. I love growing pumpkins and winter squash, but how do you know when they're ready to be picked? The first thing you need to do is what's called the thumbnail test, and that's where you press your thumbnail, or any fingernail for that matter, quite firmly into the skin. And if it cuts through easily, it is not finished growing, and you just leave it alone, and you can check it again in a week or two. In this case, it did not cut through. So what I would do is I would cut the stem, leaving about an inch or two of the stem attached, because if you knock that off either accidentally or on purpose, that opens up part of the pumpkin or winter squash to molding, and you don't want that. But then the next thing you need to do is put it through the 2-week curing process. So what's the curing process, you ask? You want to move your winter squash and pumpkins to a light area that is protected from the weather for 2 weeks. And what will happen is over the course of that time, the skin will harden, and that way they'll keep a really long time in storage. It makes all the difference. Once you've gone through that process, you can move them to a storage area that is cool and dark. So for us, that's our basement. You might put them in a closet or somewhere like that. Then we use them for pies, soups, stews, and casseroles throughout the fall and winter months. Now, spinach and Swiss chard are a totally different ballgame. Throughout the season, I harvest individual leaves from the plants, slice them up a bit, saute them in some oil, let them cool, and then I place them in freezer bags and pop them into our freezer. Or, of course, serve them with dinner. They are great to have on hand for making soups, stews, and casseroles. When I'm talking about summer squash, I'm referring to things like zucchini, patty pan, scallop squash, and so on. It is so important to harvest the squash from the plants on a regular basis and keep them to a reasonable size. Don't let those squash turn into baseball bats because that will slow down the plant's production. Well, come to think of it, maybe that's what you want. But in addition to serving summer squash with meals, I also like to shred some and freeze it so that I can make different things with zucchini during the fall and winter months. So things like zucchini bread or zucchini cake or frittatas, those types of things. Winter squash are a staple in our garden because they are so useful and so delicious. Remember that before you harvest them, do the thumbnail test, and if they are ripe, go ahead and snip them off the vines, leaving a couple of inches of stem attached. Put them through the 2-week curing process, and then go to town with all different kinds of recipes using them. Now, we store ours down in our cool, dark basement, and that has worked really well. We typically roast the winter squash in the oven and either have them as a side dish or add them to stews. You also, instead of roasting them, can chop them up, removing the skin, and use them for different recipes. Okay, we finally made it to the final vegetable that I wanted to talk about today, although it's technically a fruit, but that is the tomato. And everybody loves growing tomatoes, right? So there are grape and cherry tomatoes, and Bill's favorite small type of tomato to grow is Pandorino grape tomatoes. He loves to use them for making fresh salsa, and oh my, they're tasty. There's also slicing tomatoes, and my favorite is Chef's Choice Orange, great for using in sandwiches or salads or just as a little extra on your dinner plate. And there's paste tomatoes. Some people call them saucing tomatoes, so they're great for making things like tomato sauce, salsa, and ketchup. With all the different kinds of tomatoes that you're growing, the way you know they're ripe is when they turn the mature color that was on the seed packet. So not all tomatoes are red these days. There's purple ones, there's striped ones, there's yellow ones, there's orange ones. So yeah, refer to your seed packet, or if you bought a plant, look it up online and see what a ripe tomato looks like. You can also do a taste test so that you know if they're ripe or not. Now, if you have a frost coming and your tomatoes aren't ripe yet, just pick them and move them into a dark location such as a basement or a closet. Place them on newspapers and they will ripen for you. How cool is that? Now, as promised, here are a bunch of great food preservation resources for you. Okay, the first three things I wanted to point out to you are all on my website, susansinthegarden.com. And if you go to the guides menu and scroll down a little bit, you'll notice there's a section called Preserving the Harvest. And the way I've organized it in this table is by the name of the produce that you want to do something with. So apples, beans, leeks, chard, peas, plums, and so on. And then you'll find a link that's either to a blog post or a video where I teach you how to make chunky applesauce in this case, or how to freeze beans, that type of thing. So this has a lot of great information here that is extremely helpful. Also under the guides menu, and way down near the bottom, you'll notice there is one that says Vegetable Report Card 2025. So this is a work in progress since we haven't harvested everything yet. But what I did is I listed all of the crops that we grew this year, including the variety name. And then as I have the opportunity, or we have finished harvesting a crop, I've been putting in a letter grade and then some comments about why I thought it was great or maybe not so great. So this is really helpful for giving you some ideas for things to grow in your garden next year. I realize that it's hard to think about next year when this year's season hasn't ended. But a lot of folks have told me they love how I do a report card every year. So again, it's a work in progress, but be sure to keep checking it out and you can see how everything fared in our garden. The last thing I wanted to show you on my website is the Grow Vegetables section. And I've got all kinds of information about successfully growing vegetable crops. But if you go down to the chart, this is where I have created a growing guide for each of these crops that are listed in the first column. And yes, it was a lot of work. But what you can do is just click on the name of the crop you're interested in, and I tell you exactly how to grow it. I share some tips. I let you know if there's an insect problem you need to keep an eye out for. I also always have a section on every single page that says how to cook and preserve whatever type of crop you're looking at. So that's helpful. And I also have links to videos I've shot on growing specific types of crops. I've had a lot of folks say, we love this section and we're getting a lot of great information out of it. The next link that I wanted to share with you is for the National Center for Home Food Preservation. It is affiliated with the University of Georgia, and if you are looking for a great source of safe home food preservation techniques, this is the site you want to go to. It's completely free. And if I scroll down a little bit, you can see different methods that they talk about. Canning, jams and jellies, pickling, fermenting, freezing, drying, curing and smoking, and storing. So if you want reliable information, this is the place to go. Now, have you ever heard of the Ball Blue Book? This is a great guide to preserving. A new issue of it comes out every few years, and it's all very safe methods, and it's packed with all sorts of really tasty recipes. It's very inexpensive, less than $20 if I remember correctly. And I actually buy the new editions every time they come out because I'm always so interested to see the new recipes they've included. But this is a great resource, very inexpensive. And last but not least is a website that I have mentioned before. It's called feastingathome.com, and it is packed with all kinds of recipes for using wonderful produce. You can search by the name of the type of produce you want to use in a meal and find all kinds of wonderful fresh recipes. So this is a free website, and I definitely recommend taking a look at it because you will be so impressed and inspired by the different recipes that are available. Okay, that's everything I wanted to share with you today. I hope you picked up some new tips. Thanks so much for watching today, everybody. Happy gardening.